Supervisor Munzer and myself. And we'll work with staff and go bring that back to the board on a regular basis. We'll move on to the next item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, this is item number 22 on our agenda, and back in May of 2013, Supervisors De La Cruz and Supervisor Barrios directed staff to agendize the request for Homes for Troops to waive impact fees for the new home for an injured veteran. So there's been some discussion internally within staff to look at addressing this, and so Byron, our interim planning director, is here to discuss some of these items with your board. Thanks, Byron.
So the request for waiver totals around $17,500. That is not the total of the impact fees, but that is the impact fees that that goes to the county. There's an additional $8,500 that goes to the school districts. They are responsible for those fees. The county collects on behalf of them, but they will need to go to the school district to make that request. There is no mechanism for waiving fees, impact or otherwise, and so impact fees need to be backfilled with the general fund. But if the board wishes to take this action, staff is going to recommend that you enter into a contract with the Homes for Troops organization, as you do with other CBOs, other community-based organizations, and direct staff to then to return with the appropriate instrument to make that happen. So essentially, you'd be providing the organization with $17,500 in order to assist them in paying for the required impact fees. So that's the staff's recommendation if you want to act on this request, and we're here for any questions or direction.
Okay, I know Supervisor Barrios and Supervisor De La Cruz brought this forward. Maybe they should speak first to the item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you don't mind, I'll go first. I did my own little study and called some veterans and asked them how they felt personally about it if they were to be affected by this. And there were some things, one of them actually played the devil's advocate and said, what if a large veterans housing community is brought to our county with more than just one home? And this is something in the future that we have to be cognizant of, the fact that this could impact traffic, not just, I mean, it would benefit the veteran, but there's families that are involved, and there would be more traffic that we would have to consider. So that was one idea that was brought forward. The other idea that was brought forward from a veteran was that, and actually it kind of coincides with this, where we would defer payment of the impact fees, but when it's resold, because it could be sold to somebody other than a veteran, and that individual buying the house would then pay for the impact fees. And the only comment that came from that is that it may place a burden on the veteran in being able to sell the home, because then he or she would have to sell it for a higher amount to cover those impact fees. So those were the things that came out of my own little survey with veterans that could be affected by this. What I would like to see happen is, I like the idea of waiving part of the fee and deferring kind of a 50-50 and deferring the other 50, so it wouldn't be a burden to the veteran at the end when he or she tries to sell their home. So that would be my recommendation, is that we split it in half, but have an ordinance to address it in the event that it is sold in the future. So.
Thank you, Supervisor Barrios. Supervisor De La Cruz.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I also did some research, and I did talk to some veterans organizations, and your questions on the first, that's exactly what they said too. Is what happens if it's turned around? The good old saying, "Flip on the house." That was their concern. And we also said that there are also a lot of funds, a lot of government assistance, a lot of nonprofit organizations that really put their heart into supporting and helping disabled veterans. And so it's another added benefit that will be provided by going in this direction. And from my perspective, my concern is such as if a big developer comes in and puts an application for 600 homes and 3 of them will be used for veterans, and we impact those 300 homes impact fees dollars, and what mechanisms or what insurance do we have that they will actually will go to the veterans, because the city householder is having a hard time just monitoring those low-income housing restrictions. If the city's having a hard time, how are we going to ensure that those mechanisms, that there will be mechanisms in place that we don't go the same route that the way the city has been going on lately with these restrictions, low-income housing projects?
Supervisor Rivas?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My concern is any waiver of fees, if I read the report correctly, it must come out of our general fund. And my concern with that is clearly we're talking about a delay of opening our courthouse because we don't have
in any amount of waiving the impact fees, and then come back to this board with some kind of recommendation.
Thank you. I'm a, voice my concern with this, whole agenda item. I agree with Supervisor Rivas in the fact that we, we have to make adjustment to our general plan to our general fund, and the problem I have with it, and I think we all are grateful for veterans and injured veterans, especially the folks that their lives are changed, and we can't ever repay that debt, but it doesn't pass the straight face test for me as far as we don't really have the money to give up right now in our general fund. We're in labor negotiations right now, and we're making some very difficult decisions with our employees and asking them to make concessions, and they are concessions. And I think this organization, Homes for Troops organization, is a nationwide organization, and they've gotten a lot of funding. I'd be the first one to donate, personally, privately to an organization like this, and especially if it's some good is coming to our community, and I think that's how the approach should be made, is through private contributions and fundraising rather than us waiving impact fees. Our impact fees, our schedules are, some of them are back from 1987, so that kind of tells you that we're not keeping up with, the true costs of the impacts anyhow. And I know I sound like a real, bad person, not wanting to, do this, but I just can't support this unless we do it for all organizations, or if we go through the, the non-community-based organizations' contribution at the beginning of our funding year, and put aside some of our, monies that we have for that effort. That would be fair game. But it takes it away from another community contribution. But I'll go along with whatever is the wisdom of the full board, of course, but I think we're opening up, maybe where we will lose control as far as what, we'll have other organizations and other needs to waive fees and things like that, and that concerns me, particularly right now when we can't afford it. So that's where I'm at. Any public comment?
Marty Richard from Hollister. I didn't realize this was on the agenda, so I didn't do any studying. And I don't think anybody's a bad person for facing up to the realism of what's entailed. Okay, so I hope you don't think that I think that. I certainly don't think that. I understand you're facing some problems, whatever. I do think we need to find a way to do this, but I would have some suggestions. I think if we do it in haste, we're going to make a mistake. First of all, I don't think it should apply to all veterans. I'm a veteran. I don't think it should apply to me. I don't think it should apply to veterans with a 5% disabled. In this particular case, we have to understand the cases involved here. In this particular case, it's obviously a veteran who's 100% disabled. We, as American citizens, we put them in harm's way. I may need an extra minute here because I got to think for a second. The home is a specially built home made for a person who is disabled. There's all kinds of things involved here. And I, too, don't think the money should have to come out of the general fund. So with that, I agree with you. But I often sit here and stand here during, especially during the city meetings, and hear about us giving loans to people for basically no percent for 50 years because they happen to be needy. We say, okay, you're poor, so here's a loan so you can help buy your home. It's 1% interest, and you don't even have to pay it until who the heck knows when, okay? It's hard to believe we can't find money in one of those projects to offset this kind of a thing. So we have to establish some rules, because otherwise, yes, everybody will come in. And I think you should establish rules. And I don't, everybody's going to get a fair deal, but we can't treat everybody equally if you understand the difference. We can't have to say we did it for this one, we have to do it for that one. No, everybody gets a fair deal based on whatever the deal is. In this case, I think what you ought to do is, if you can't find a way to do it, because to do it in haste would be a mistake, is to essentially put this aside until, if you have to collect the impact fees on the thing that you might give them back, if you get the money offset by some other money, and then go looking for other monies. Because I cannot believe we can give people $30,000 because they happen to be low income and say, oh, it's a 1% simple interest, and you don't even have to pay a penny back till you sell the house, and we can't find $17,000 to offset these impact fees for somebody who we put in harm's way. I'm going to run over. I hope you will allow me to do so a little bit. So I think that's what we should be looking at. We should be looking at those other programs and say, where can we find the money in these other programs to help the people who need it the most, the most. And if somebody who gives up, who winds up with 100% disability because we put them in harm's way as a public, we owe them something, I think, special. I understand the problem. Oh, maybe somebody will build a special veterans home and it'll be 500 apartments, and maybe they'll want to waive the impact fees on all 500. Well, obviously, if you find a way to offset the money, then the money issue will take care of itself. And if you run out of money, then you can't do it. But you certainly could find a way to offset the money, and I don't think you should take it out of the general fund, because I think that would set a bad precedent. So I'm offering a compromise solution. I hope you will do that. I hope you will perhaps say, look, we're open to looking for the funds to offset this, even if, and that would be the perfect way to do it, because that's the way you do it on talking about controlling the future if you sell the house to someone who doesn't qualify. That's the way they do it on the low income. They say, oh, we have a lien on the home, right? For that loan we gave you that doesn't have to be paid back until you sell the home. I understand they have enforcement problems, but the enforcement problem is government's problem. It's not the program problem. It's enforcement. It's something we should be able to do. Everybody in the world put liens on houses. You can't have somebody put an electrical receptacle in your house without getting a lien thing in the mail. So I think we could do that. So I hope you can find a way to do that, and I hope you will appoint some people to do that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hopefully it solves.
Anyone else from the public? Not, I'll bring it back to the board for some ideas, and I think some good points were made there. And, you know, we have all these housing programs for seniors and low and moderate income, and I just wonder if there's some sort of grant or money that our housing guy could come up with that would help offset some of this, and maybe it could be, you know, come out of a different pot of funds.
Mr. Chair, excuse me, why don't you take this idea to the committee you just created? I mean, right off the bat, I could think of where Enrique's at, community development, the block grant money out there. I know that some of those funds are tied specifically for senior citizens, for low income, for distress. I know that, and that's how they get applied, and that's how you have to spend the money. So my recommendation, Mr. Chair, you're the chairman, is to take this idea to the HOC committee and start exploring other options. And you know, if a housing project is going to get $200,000 a year, well, maybe 10% can go to, you know, another special need too, and you know, just some thoughts, some ideas.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
You know, just so the board's aware, staff has met probably 3 or 4 times on this particular item, as well as many other times with regards to impact fees and tax sharing agreements and a few other things. But one of the things that we discussed was setting up the ad hoc committee and doing something about setting rules or setting policy. And I think this is really an important thing that we need to look at with regards to these different fees that we receive. So I strongly encourage that you know, we have this, you know, the ad hoc committee that's just created to look at this and to address it. You know, there's a lot of things that can come into play. This person's 100% disabled, may not qualify for low income. So there's a lot of other elements that we'd probably need to consider. But anyways, I just wanted to relay that to you.
All right. Supervisor Munzer?
Byron? I'm getting back. So basically, is this person waiting for us to make a decision so he can move into his new house?
Well,
Are we
there's-
that close to finish the construction?
We're working with the organization, and that, you know, this request has been made, so they'll have to figure out what they're going to do, but the county can't issue the final without a resolution on
But the
it.
construction's done?
Yes.
Okay, because I would like to make the recommendation and motion that we table this to the meeting of the 19th and have the newly formed ad hoc committee study this and come back with a recommendation, date certain of the 19th.
Okay.
That would be my motion.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'm going to second just for, so that we can discuss it. I really would like to see this tied to our community-based organizations, and the reason I say that is because Byron knows that when you defer payment and you have to do some sort of a lien, you may or may not be paying attention to that when the time comes, that who's going to get it, how are you going to move forward with securing this money, who's it going to go to. All of that puts added cost to time and staff, and it might not happen until maybe 30 years from now. I would hate to do that to staff and to county. I would rather see it tied to community-based organizations. We don't have anything right now that addresses our veterans under community-based. They may fall into a senior organization, but not for a disabled, injured, Homes for Troops type organization where they are building a special home for a veteran. So I would rather go that direction than to see it tied in through our impact fees. But I would like to make a commitment, and I don't know where we are at this time with monies from our sales tax, if we're ahead of the game. Well, we maybe could make a commitment to put some dollars into this organization. Just a thought.
Okay, thanks. I know we wrestle with the community-based organizations funding. It seems like there's a need for $4 for the $1 that we have, and but I agree that we have to make those tough decisions and go in that direction. Supervisor Rivas?
Right, and I was about to say the same thing. I think it's a great point that this should fall under the community-based organization section, but it is obviously every single budget year it's a challenging discussion because we have the same organizations coming up, and so I think it's a great idea. I'd be willing to entertain the idea, but at the same time, when those organizations are up, we have to understand as a board that we're going to have to make a reduction somewhere with one of those organizations, and it's easier said than done. So thanks, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, I totally support Supervisor Rios on that concept because I remember the discussions that we had. Perfect example of during this budget year where there was an organization that needed some funds to match the $3, $4, and we decided to take a certain percentage from all the other organizations to give it to that organization. So the more organizations we add into this pot of money that's available, the more that the ones who have it now will be consistently be dropping. So we'll just
and it really is too bad, and some of the realities to veteran benefits originates in Washington, D.C., where they continue to cut veteran benefits, and that's where it really should come from is Washington, rather than at a local level that we're wrestling with this, and because we all want to take care of those that gave so much up. And I like the motion. It may be something else will come out of an effort to look at other avenues of funding and how we could get this done, but perhaps we could explore those areas, and maybe something else will come to mind and come back to the board. If there's no further discussion, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? I guess 5-0. Okay, we'll have it worked on and come back on the 19th.
Yes, and we'll come back to your board on the 19th. We'll go ahead and set up a meeting with the ad hoc committee, and we'll address that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Mr. Chair, we're on our next item number 23, and this is kind of a standing item for every board meeting. We'd like to give you an update on where we're at with the general plan, and we have Byron Turner here to present that to you.
Thank you. As I reported at the last meeting, we did receive proposals to pick up the general plan and complete the job. We have ranked and scored the proposals, and based on this, we have chosen a consultant. It is EMC Planning Group out of Monterey. We are currently discussing the scope of work and working on the contract with this consultant, and I expect to bring the contract before the board probably December. First meeting in December, I think, is a realistic time to have this completed. So that consists of the report.
Good. That's positive. And I had a phone call yesterday from a property owner that wants to move forward with a commercial business, and he was hoping to move forward with a new general plan, but we're not 100% sure when that's going to happen. But and that's a second one that I've had in a matter of a few weeks. So there's a lot of interest for us to finish this thing. Any other comments from the board? If not, we'll look forward to seeing that in first meeting in December.
I would like to add one thing just based on what you just said, and we get those calls too, and we are continuing to encourage people to go ahead and make their application, that there's no need to wait for the general plan to be completed if they're contemplating a project. So I wanted to get that out there as well.
Yeah, very good, thank you, and that's, I was hoping you've been doing that, and I've had nothing but good comments about your helpfulness in that aspect, so you're doing a good job, Byron. Thank you. Let's see, we got that done. Last item, Mr. Espinosa.
Yes, we're at our last item. This is a fiber optic project report back to your board. We've been doing some work on this. We've actually presented this to the Intergovernmental Committee and got a full commitment by the committee to move forward with the fiber project. And we have our Public Works, Steve Wittry, Director of Public Works, as well as Adam Goldstone here to present to your board about the fiber project.
Hi there, good morning. Just one moment here while this warms up. Okay, so as this is opening here, this is a just a brief update on where we're at with this fiber optic cable infrastructure project. As you're aware, the county and city's lease with Charter Cable for our for use of their infrastructure for our computer networking is going to end in just a little over a year. So we've been working for some time now on how to get our own infrastructure in place to replace the need for using theirs. We've been designing, as I said, and working with the city, and we're nearly done with design, and the MOU is currently being reviewed by both agencies, and I hope to have that back to the board hopefully by the end of this year, maybe the last meeting, depending on how the rest of the legal review progresses. You're looking at an aerial here that kind of helps show the facilities from both agencies that would be connected initially as a part of this project. The locations identified with the yellow star are the ones that will be included in the bid. The red stars will be listed as ad alternates, and depending on where the price of the bids come in at and each agency's kind of funding situation, those three facilities shown there could be added at the cost of their respective agencies. So just going over it real quick, starting at the top, we have the Hollister Police Department, the Sheriff's Office / Public Works Department, the airport and future fire station number 3. Coming down, the jail and juvenile hall would be added if funding allows. To be included would be the HHSA and Behavioral Health Building. There's already a stretch through downtown running from Park Hill, the communications tower that was put up there, down to the Network Operations Center of the county, located right next door. Also, the community center would be, the city community center would be added if funding allows. City Hall will be included, and then fire station number 1, again, if funding allows. This next slide kind of shows a kind of, for lack of a better term, like a single line drawing of the facilities and how the fiber would run through and connect over to all of them. This image, I know it differs a little bit from the one that was in your board agenda. I've been refining it. This will be included in the MOU, just to help memorialize all the facilities to be included. And then the final thing is just an interesting little image I found online, kind of showing what the fiber looks like. This is designed to be underground. It will be inside a plastic conduit. We will use directional boring, like horizontal drilling, rather than trenching, to lay this throughout the city and the county. And we're looking at 96 strands, so there's plenty of capacity for the future. And there's many types of elements within this cable just to help protect it from the elements and try to ensure its reliability. And that's all I have, unless you have any questions.
Okay, any questions from the board?
Thank you, Mr.
Supervisor
Chair.
Barrios?
Thank you. Ray, the school district's County Office of Education had expressed an interest in being a part of this. Any news on where we're at with them, and because they would be another source of funding if they were wanting to help out?
Right, yeah, and we have not, I have not personally contacted them. I'll probably work with the Public Works Department on that and meet with them about that. Again, we're still at the initial phases. The one thing that was brought out here, it's pretty important, is if you go up to slide, where's it at? It's the second slide, where you have the yellow stars there. Really, that's kind of our backbone, and that's kind of the core. And then after that, there's going to be splinters. They're going to be coming off of that. So the ones marked in red are going to be, looks like those are the ones that are going to be paid for by the agency. So we would probably be doing the same thing if the Office of Ed wanted to do this as well, where they would probably pay their portion and probably a segment of the backbone. But that's, that's kind of really the key, is getting the core, the backbone first in place, and then from there splintering off to the other sites.
So it wouldn't be difficult to splinter off of that core if there were other agencies interested in the future then?
That's correct, yeah, it wouldn't be an impact. And again, we have the rack space for it at both the NOC 1 and NOC 2 for that, and being able to basically move from there or jumper from there out to wherever we need to go. So that would be okay.
And this came out of well, I don't know that the idea came out of intergovernmental, but it's been at intergovernmental every meeting, and so I appreciate that this is moving forward as expected. So, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, I wish I was on one of those committees that we could talk about fiber optics in detail. It sounds interesting.
It's like Apple's head.
Yeah. Anyway, any public comment?
Monty Richmond from Hollister. I just wondering approximately where, without giving me the exact location for security purposes, but approximately where is the major trunk connection for this line? Where does it match up with the major trunk?
It's essentially going to run from our network center next door out to the sheriff's office, where there's another network center with the splinters coming off.
Okay, our network center is what's connected to a trunk.
So in essence, what I just explained as the backbone kind of is the trunk, is what we're referring to. So when you look at NOC 2, NOC 1, that's in bold print, that's ultimately the trunk or the backbone.
Okay,
from there, you can splinter off to the PD, to the fire.
Where is our net connection? Where's our main net connection? Maybe that's trunks.
You're talking internet connection, you're talking outside connection, or what do you?
Outside connection.
Yeah, so that would be at the NOC 1.
Oh, that's what I want to know.
Yeah,
okay.
NOC 1. Yeah.
And we have that already in
That's
place.
already in place.
Thank you.
And we actually have a cable already ran directional board from Park Hill down to NOC 1 already. So that work's already been done.
Okay. Anybody else? Seeing none, I guess that's just a report.
Just an update, see if you had any questions.
Okay, thanks, Adam.
Thank you very much.
County Council, would you like to report for a closed session?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Board of Supervisors will now adjourn into closed session to discuss agenda items number 25 and 26 on today's agenda. Agenda number 25 is to confer with its labor negotiators. The agency designated representatives are Danya Torres Wong, Allison Hauk, Ray Espinoza, Joe Paul Gonzalez, Melinda Casillas, Mark Gregerson, and Georgia Cochran. The employee organizations involved are the Institutions Association, Law Enforcement Management, Management Employees Group, SEI Local 521. The General Unit Employees, SEIU United Long-Term Care Workers Local 6434. The authority for this closed session is found in California Government Code Section 54957.6. Agenda number 25 is to meet in closed session regarding the appointment of a public employee. In this matter, it's the Agricultural Commissioner and Sealer of Weights and Measures. Authority to meet in closed session is Government Code Section 54957. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Would the public would like to make a comment on any closed session items? If not, we'll adjourn to closed session. Thank you.
I will. They've been really good, you know.
No, I think you're right. How's that doing?
I can't do, this is my laptop, this is the good one. But I'm starting to get a little bit, because I use it all the time. So this one is getting a little tired.
Well, was it good therapy?
Well, you're not going to be at our next meeting?
Oh, you can't.
Oh.
Yeah.